Good afternoon, everyone. It is the top of the hour or shortly thereafter, so we're going to go ahead and start today's Brown Bag session. And so for those that don't know who I am, I'm Lakeisha Hull. I'm the Planning Director for Prince George's County. We have a big crowd online, super excited for those that are joining us virtually. We also have some great folks that are here in the office with us today. So if you guys are in Largo, please feel free to come and join us in person as well. We also have some special guests online, and so definitely want to acknowledge other planning directors. If there's any representatives from council offices, thank you so much for joining us online. And we also have some special guests here in the Global Cafe. Great weather today, so super excited as well that you're able to spend the next hour with us. And so as part of the Brown Bag sessions that we have, we're opening up our doors and really trying to make sure that the public is very aware of the great stuff we're doing here at the Commission. The Planning Department, as you guys know, are very active on so many different legislation, policies, and codes. So today we're going to spend some time talking about zoning and subdivision 101. I have a great star team here that's going to touch on some of the things you guys are interested in. At the end of the session, we're going to have question and answers, and so feel free to stick around for any questions that you may have. And also as part of some housekeeping items, if you're online, please mute yourself. We'll be able to answer your questions. You can also put them in the chat. And so with that being said, I do want to turn over the microphone to our MC for today. So Natalia, you can come on up. Thank you so much. Enjoy today's session.
Right, good afternoon, everyone. So before we get into the topic of today, I just wanted to do a brief recap of our previous two sessions. So whoever joined us for the first time, welcome. This is a series of sessions that we've been hosting since September. Yes, September. And we're planning new sessions for next year, so stay tuned for updates that will come soon. So in the first session, we had a brief overview on the different divisions that we have currently at the Planning Department. The Planning Director gave a great presentation on the structure of the division of the Planning Department, and our division chiefs presented their divisions, their staff, and what they do for the county. We also had have them answering questions. We shared with you their information, staff's information, in case you have any questions or any thoughts that you wanted to ask them about your projects, future projects, anything that's going on in the department. During the session number 2, we did a quick briefing on the county code updates, which included CB 15, the Woodland Conservation Ordinance, and the Urban Design Street Guidelines. And then we move into a quick brainstorming session. That session was different, just for everyone's understanding. It was a little different from our other sessions and from what we plan in the future. That was a little session for you to give us feedback, so we wanted to hear what were your suggestions, what you wanted to hear in future Brown Bag sessions. We received really great input, and we are collecting it to prepare for next year. With that, we are gonna move into zoning and subdivision. Before we go that, I wanna remind you, our December session is gonna be on the Woodland Conservation Ordinance. We're gonna have the environmental planning section presenting. So I hope you register at the end of this session. Registration will be open for the December session, so please don't forget to register. And without further ado, let's give a welcome to our speakers for today. Jeremy Hurlbut, Supervisor of the Zoning Section.
Thanks, Natalia. As Natalia kind of spoke, we're going to talk about mainly subdivision and zoning and how it plays in our development review process here at the Commission. There we go. All right, sorry about that. So just a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about. And Natalia just went over the recap. I'm going to talk about zoning. Udula is going to talk about subdivision. And she's going to touch upon our site plan process briefly and our final plat process, as well as kind of give an overview of how citizens get involved and are notified of the public meetings that we have here. And then we'll end with a chance to answer all your questions. So zoning, the development review process is intended to provide the organizational framework for review of development proposals and provide an opportunity for planning staff, planning board, the district council, and also to receive input from citizens on development applications. Zoning provides the regulations of what uses and where they can go and be developed within the county. And so zoning is really the guide to how we process zoning. And we really try to stress, and we think it's very important that citizens and the public and just everyone in large or in total gets involved at the zoning stage, not only because I'm the supervisor and I think it's very important, but also because it sets up that framework. And so if you want a certain use in your neighborhood or in your strip center or wherever it may be, it starts with zoning. And so that allows what permitted uses, what can be allowed by special exception and so forth. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. So the zoning really has two main components. The first is the zoning ordinance that sets up those regulations, has the use table that tells you what uses can go in what zones. It has development standards, it has densities, how big, how tall, how wide the building can be, all those type of things. So it sets those rules. The second component is the zoning map. And so it's this cool colored map like you see at the bottom of the screen that shows which of those rules, because the rules by zone are different for each zone. So, what we're seeing here is some residential zones in the yellow and then some commercial zones in the pink. And so, I think, yeah. And so, you may be able to put a fast food restaurant in the pink areas, but you may not be able to do that in the yellow areas. But you may be able to put a use, within all those zones. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So there are 5, we kind of broke the zoning types into 5 categories for this presentation. So there's residential, and so, it is what it says, it's dwelling units, residence, and other supporting uses such as churches, maybe think small scale daycares in your neighbor's house or something like that, or in-home businesses that are permitted. There's mixed use zones. So these are where we're mixing uses. We're allowing residential and retail, or office and retail, different things. It can be vertical, it can be horizontal. There's non-residential zones. These are, office zones, commercial areas, those industrial areas, things that are not just residential. And then there's transit-oriented or activity-centered zones. These kind of speak back to our master plan and general plan, which really kind of establish the vision for the zones in the county. And these are more intense density areas where the master plan and the general plan is focusing development within the county. So think Prince George's Plaza, College Park, New Carrollton, here in Largo, and other places like that. And the 5th category we've highlighted is the MIO zone, or the Military Installation Overlay Zone. And so this is a zone that surrounds Andrews Air Force Base and has certain restrictions on the type of uses and the height of those uses as it pertains to the air base there, so that there isn't conflicts within that. One zone that we don't have in this slide is the PD zones. And so the PD zones are zones that we'll talk a little bit more about later on, but these were developed with intention of creating flexibility for developers in development. So they allow in certain instances within each of the zones for you, if you have a certain acreage of land or certain factors that you're adjacent to certain things and different things like that, that you can kind of craft the zoning regulations to meet the needs of your development. And so this has a very lengthy process and is treated like a rezoning, which we'll talk more about later. But But to kind of go back to the zoning ordinance, so as we talked about, it's creating that framework of land uses, the hierarchy of more intense development near our metro stations or commercial areas and making it less dense as we move out. The zoning districts, so, are you in a residential medium family density, where you can have apartments and townhouses and single families, or are you in a single family zone, or are you in a more intense commercial zone, all those type of things. It sets up the requirements for building form, so setbacks, height, density, floor area, different things like that. It also establishes the procedures for notification of adjacent properties and neighbors and how that process works. But it also includes the requirements for the type of documents that we receive to review. So we not only are looking at things in terms of the zoning ordinance, but other regulations that we're responsible for. So think about tree conservation. We administer that through the commission, and other things such as like noise studies. So if you're near the Beltway, we're going to require you to submit a noise study with your development to analyze the impacts on that and to mitigate those type of things, as well as transportation and others.
Jeremy, what was the extra zoning category you mentioned?
Planned development.
Okay.
Yeah. So the zoning map, as I mentioned before, it lays out those geographic locations where each zone is applied. This is where you would go to figure out where your use could happen in the county. It has different color codings and abbreviations for the zoning categories, which relate to our zoning ordinance and the regulations within it. And this is legally binding. Just like the zoning ordinance is our set of rules for regulating development, the zoning map is legally binding. And to change it, you have to go through a process to do that rezoning. Our official zoning map is located on PG Atlas, which is an online map. And so you can access that, and it's a great tool to utilize to find zones, and there's a number of different layers that you can utilize on that. Our zoning ordinance likewise is online, as shown here in this screenshot of what our Encode web viewer looks like. And in August of 2000, let me double check my dates. I get confused sometimes. So in April 1st, 2022, the county council adopted the new zoning ordinance, which you can see on the left-hand side, bottom tab. However, applications have the ability to still utilize the prior zoning ordinance until April 1st, 2025. And because some of the uses already have been developed under that prior code and are continuing to develop under that, think large subdivisions and things, the new code has been set up to allow for those to continue. So our website on the far right shows the prior zoning ordinance and subdivision code. The county council also adopted a new subdivision regulations, which is second from the left, and new landscape manual, which is just to the right of that. This website also includes at the top a number of tools, so if you're looking for a specific use, you can look that up through land use lookup. Has links to the PG Atlas and to other important websites and things that you may need to utilize in order to get your entitlements. So we'll run through a quick example. Hunt's Burgers.
That's right. That's right.
Our deputy director, no relation. But essentially, we've utilized this in our planning academy to kind of illustrate the point of, how you utilize these two tools, the zoning ordinance and the zoning map. So if I was opening a fast food restaurant, a restaurant with a drive-through, I would first go to our zoning ordinance, look at the use table. I would, look at the left-hand column, find the principal use category, eating and drinking establishment in this case. And then I look at the principal use types in the next column, which you can see there's 3 different types that you could qualify under. On the online version, you can click on these and it gives you the definition. And so we know we want to do a drive-through, so we're in that last category. So the table also gives us other information, which you can see at the top of the screen. It tells you what uses are permitted with a P. That means you can do them in those zones. SE means special exception. That means you may be able to do them if you meet a certain criteria that are within the zoning ordinance, and it's approved by the zoning hearing examiner and the district council. And X's means it's prohibited, so you would have to find another geographic location to do that use, or you would have to consider rezoning the property, which will come later. So in our example, we know that we can do the use in the commercial service, the commercial general office, the industrial employment zone, and the town activity center edge zone, so that's what those acronyms mean. We know that none of them are permitted by special exception, and then at the bottom are all the areas where it's prohibited. So this is the intersection that I've identified through my market research. I want my fast food restaurant to go. So you can see those zoning categories at the top of the screen illustrated in the red, the gray, and the pink down below. So in any of those areas, I could develop my fast food restaurant, just not in those residential zones, which are the oranges and yellows on that periphery. So I want to be right there at that main intersection, so I'm going to target one of those locations to put my fast food restaurant. But if none of those properties work, or they're all occupied by development already, and I want to rezone my property, I'm going to, have to seek a rezoning. And there's 3 ways within the county primarily to do that, and we'll highlight those here. This is a very complex process, I'll just say, and not only within Prince George's County, but also in the state of Maryland. The state indicates that they want the zoning process to be a comprehensive view that has serious thought, and that's why most of our zoning is typically administered as part of our general plan and master plan process, because we undertake studies, we take a lot of citizen input, looking into how to rezone property, and we take it very seriously. But these processes all take over a year to complete at a minimum. And so we'll kind of highlight what those are. The first one's called the zoning map amendment. This is subject to what is called the change in mistake rule by the state. The properties owners would have to demonstrate that there's been a significant change in the character of the neighborhood that surrounds the property and should be rezoned to fit the fabric of that neighborhood now. The other category is a mistake, and this is that when the legislation was being created by the district council, who is essentially the county council sitting on development case and legislation, it has to be demonstrated that some evidence was presented to them that was not considered correctly, and that there was a mistake made in applying that zoning at that time. The justification is either one, that the applicant does extend, I mean, as part of this process, the applicant has to submit justification and history and research of the category. Staff then analyzes that, does our own research, and provides a recommendation to the board, the planning board, who further recommends it to the district council before it can be approved. The next category would be, bear with us while we deal with getting the PowerPoint back, but the next option of rezoning would be a countywide map amendment. This process happened a few years ago as part of our new zoning ordinance, and this is where we are looking at the county as a whole as part of the new zoning ordinance, or a new plan, general plan. And so we would look at the whole entire meetings, things, sorry. So we look at it comprehensively, property by property. In the case of the countywide map amendment, we had over 600 meetings with the public to receive input. There's hours of testimony, which some of us in the room have probably sat through and helped provide. And so that helped inform the district council and staff of the desires of the community and the effects of different properties to one another and how we rezone those properties. The third is going to be, and the last is the sectional map amendment process. So if you're familiar with our master plans, they cover pretty much the whole county, and so the sectional map amendment process looks at certain areas of the county, and it's kind of a sub-plan to the general plan, and that's where they rezone properties that are identified that need to change based on public testimony and research, and kind of the vision that's being created by that sector plan. So with all that, and I will mention, we kind of put that plan development zone category in the zoning map amendment category. It follows a very similar process, but it actually has an additional public hearing to kind of go over the development standards at the planning board level. So that's how it fits in to this slide. And so last, the rezoning process, and obviously there's the government bodies, there's the planning board, the district council, and those, but we also have the People's Zoning Council, which is something we haven't really touched upon, but it's a representative that kind of protects citizens' rights in the process and answers questions and does those different things. So that's a good resource for the public to reach out to the People's Zoning Council, who can answer legal questions about rezonings and different categories like that. There's also municipalities, civic associations, so HOAs, adjoining properties, the public at large. And so, like I said earlier on at the beginning of this, that we really stress the importance of the public being involved in this process. And so with that, I'll stop talking and let Vidula kind of talk about subdivision, which would be the next step in the development process.
Thank you, Jeremy. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mridula Gupta. I'm the acting supervisor of the subdivision section. And I want to reiterate what Jeremy stressed at the end, public involvement at the zoning stage, because once you come to let me change the slide first, sorry. Because once you come to subdivision, the land use has already been determined for that area. And subdivision is usually the first, if you're not going through rezoning, subdivision is the first application that you will come with, you or the developer will come with to MNCPPC for review and approval. So what's subdivision? So subdivision is I said it's the next step, but it may be the first step in the development application process. It's a process of dividing a property into one or more lots, parcels, or other tracts, or other types of land division. It's done to help manage development, and it also makes it easier to pace development and provide flexibility. You can develop one or individual lots or parcel for development rather than the whole tract. Subdivision also occurs if you are changing the use of the property from non-residential to residential, residential to non-residential, or you have non-residential or residential development to mixed-use development. I know Jeremy talked about mixed-use development and what it means. Subdivision process also serves to address the adequacy of public facilities, such as transportation, parks, public safety, and make sure that they're functional, that they're adequate, they're proper to serve the residents, and also other considerations that we take as staff reviews the application. The subdivision process also assesses the impact the development will have on the surrounding neighborhood. And this is the stage where we also evaluate the environmental impacts of the development and how they will be mitigated. So ultimately, the purpose of subdivision is to ensure that there are adequate public facilities available to serve a specific site. So as part of the review, staff looks at all these three bullet points that are listed on the slide. The three purposes. The review is based on specific county regulations and policies that are coded in our subdivision regulations and our zoning ordinance to ensure that public facilities are available once the proposed development is approved. So this gives a list of what public facility standards are reviewed at the time of subdivision. You can see, transportation, parks. This is self-explanatory. The last bullet talks about potential impact of the proposed development on the school cluster. So county has established a per dwelling fee that's to be paid by the developer. There are other fees that are evaluated by the state and the county for development. They could be public safety surcharge fees that are paid by the developer at the time of permit. And they are essentially collected by DPI, not by us, because you file your permits with them. Okay. So subdivision in Prince George's County. So subdivision regulations, I talked about them, they're different from the zoning ordinance. Subdivision regulations are laws or regulations for the division of land, or if it's already recorded into two or more lots, including provision of public streets and other public facilities. Subdivision regulations are adopted by the county council, and they can also be used to designate suitable sites for provision of public facilities, like we have designated sites for schools or libraries. There are different types of applications that subdivision section looks at. Preliminary plans, they are essentially preliminary, as the name states, to ensure orderly, planned, and efficient economic development of the land before any division or establishment of lots or parcels is approved. The subdivision analysis evaluates the design criteria that's listed in our subdivision regulations and our zoning ordinance, and it also finds conformance with our master plans. Then we have final plats that are essentially follow the preliminary plan. They are final plats of subdivision. They essentially provide pertinent engineering data to essentially establish each lot, block, parcel, or street on the ground. Certificates of adequacy, they are a new application type that was introduced with the new subdivision regulation that came into effect in April 2022. A certificate of adequacy essentially is submitted concurrently with the preliminary plan application. It's reviewed concurrently, but it's approved by our planning director before the preliminary plan of subdivision is approved. So certificate of adequacy confirms that the necessary infrastructure will be available to serve the proposed subdivision. This kind of, we split the public adequacy piece outside preliminary plan of subdivision and made it a new application process. Vacation petitions are required sometimes, and they can be vacation of existing lots or parcels. An owner can petition the vacation or abandonment of that plat if they want to develop, if the development plans have changed and they want to develop the site for something else other than what it was approved for. Okay, next. Next we'll discuss site plans. We just have one slide for this very important step in our development process. This was zoning and subdivision 101, so maybe Ho Jong is here. She is the supervisor of our urban design section. And hopefully we have a brown bag session for our site plans. The site plan is essentially a graphic illustration of the site and all its improvements, including the buildings, parking facilities, landscaping. It details the physical development, for example, the architecture, stormwater management, urban conservation, parking, lighting, signage. At this time, we have 4 types of site plan applications. And this harks back to the old zoning ordinance when we had conceptual site plans and comprehensive design plans. They essentially, with the first 2 types, show the conceptual relationship, basic relationship between the proposed items on the site, the parking layout, the building envelope, the landscaping, buffers, and major physical features. The detailed site plan and specific design plans, as by the name, it gives a more fleshed out a view of the site plans, and they also are the permit plans for those developments. That was the end of the site plans. The next step in the development process is the final plat. The final plat is essentially, it's a scale drawing of the land that has been approved for development, and it provides all information necessary to lay out the lots, the parcels, essentially the subdivision on the ground, essentially. It needs to be recorded in the land records. That makes it a legally binding and a valid document regarding the property. Final plats are reviewed by staff essentially to ensure conformance with the approved preliminary plan of subdivision and the detailed site plan or the specific design plan or the special exception if there is one for the property. Final plats are approved by the planning board at regularly scheduled building meetings. We also have minor final plats which are approved and signed by the planning director. I would stress the timelines which are needed to be adhered to for filing the final plat and also the recordation. We have many instances where we have developers or attorneys who have worked in the county for a long time, more than I have, but it's easy to miss that the preliminary plan is only valid for 2 years or it's valid for 6 years, and the final plats need to be filed within the validity period of the preliminary plan or subdivision, unless an extension has been approved. And then once the final plat has been approved, it needs to be recorded within 6 months in the land records. Otherwise, it's no longer valid and you have to come back all over again. I just wanted to stress that. And also for all property owners here in the audience, make sure if you're closing on a deal or buying a piece of property, make sure you have a copy of the record plat for your property. You may need to otherwise hire a surveyor to create a plat. That could cost you money. And you need a copy of the plat if you're going for any development of your lot, you're even building a deck or making an addition, you need a copy of that final plat. The next four or five slides are about meetings and type of public participation that we have. First one is a subdivision and development review committee meetings that we have every other Friday. They're not really public meetings, they are open to the public, but they're essentially meetings where staff, after their preliminary review of the development application, provides major issues to the applicant and their team. As stated here, it's essentially attended by MSPPC staff from all departments. It may be in attendance by county agencies, state agencies, municipalities, if the property is within the municipality limit. I did put in there that the agenda is published in advance on our website, at least a couple of days ahead. So if public wants to see what's on the agenda, and they can attend the meeting, but public is not allowed to participate. But there are other avenues, but public is always welcome to submit their comments in writing or via email or by phone. This is basically gives types of meeting notices that you may have noticed all over the county. I myself was not aware of all the different colors that we had. And the slide also gives the ways that public can get involved and participate in the many development processes that we discussed here, and how you can register to become a person of record at ptplan.org/record. I think there are different ways to get to the same website. You can always contact staff, and Jeremy mentioned the People's Zoning Council earlier. That's also a contact that's available. There's a required public notice for any development application that goes through a public hearing. This is a physical sign that needs to be posted on the property. And there are very specific requirements, both in the zoning ordinance and the subdivision regulations, regarding when, where, and how they need to be posted on the property. So make sure you're up to speed on that. The signs I know it's a lot on that sign, but they have to show or depict a lot of information that's required. It's required to provide basic information about the hearing itself, including the application number, the project description, hearing date, time, location, the applicant's information, and also MNCPPC information, how to become a person of record, a phone number to call. As I said, there's also public notice. There are written mailings that are required to be done with every development application. They can be informational mailings that are sent out before you start a project, acceptance mailings, native yawning. And pre-application neighborhood meetings. Again, there are very specific requirements for these mailings. Their content, we have a template on our website that you can use, and the notices whom they need to be mailed to. There's a list whom they need to be mailed to. This slide essentially lists the several ways the public can participate in the development process. I'm not going to go through all that, we just talked about that. These are other ways to track development in the county and participate in the project. Gives links to, I don't know if they can make available later.
Excuse me, Marshall, sorry. Would you mind going back one slide, please, for our virtual?
Sure.
And while we're on that slide, there was one question in the chat, and I'm not sure if it's for you or for staff in general. What is suggested for more help with using the website to locate applicable zoning codes and rules?
For a specific site. What does it say?
Yeah, I guess so, to locate applicable zoning codes and rules, yeah.
Yeah, so, good afternoon, everyone. I'm James Hunt, I'm the Deputy Director here. Just to answer that particular question itself, the citizens, anyone can reach out to Planning Information Services, and that's what their role is to provide that information to you, that support, how to locate various information within the zoning ordinance, what's online, anything that you actually need. If they don't have it there, they can connect you to the right folks who do have it. So that's an opportunity there. So that, please definitely take a look at that. We can get you that information as well before I leave out of here today. One other thing I wanted to make sure we talked about, and first of all, I want to say thank you to both Mridula and Jeremy. Can you give them a round of applause real quick? Thank you so much. They've done a great job here explaining this process. I know it's very extensive and lengthy, but it's very much necessary for development here in Prince George's County. One of the things they really talked about, but touched on, but got off of real quickly was the option for simultaneous review. We do realize that within the development process itself, time is money, right? So it's going to be important. One of the things to take advantage of within the process is simultaneous review. Because if you have to go through both the preliminary plan of subdivision process, which could be 70 to 140 days after acceptance, plus a detailed site plan process, then that's going to really extend your time frame if you don't do it at the same time. So that could push it out to potentially over a year. And so what you want to do, if possible, try to get that within the same time frame so staff can be reviewing both application types. Now, I will say this. It's not going to be something that's very easy to go through. When I say easy, I want to be clear on this. They're going to have to work through both sides of it, because on one side you got to make sure that there's adequate public facilities, just like Mridula was talking about, for that particular site itself. In addition to that, you've got to make sure that the regular design features are in there from the zoning ordinance. So all that's taken care of, okay? So you've got to make sure that's happening, but it's an option for you to take advantage of. In addition to that, you can kind of marry up some of these meeting requests as well. So when you have these pre-application neighborhood meetings, these meetings for pre-application conferences that are required under the new zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations, that's an opportunity there to cut down on time frames. So that's a really good option for you to take advantage of as well, okay? So right now I want to kind of see, I think that's all we have, but I wanted to actually see if there's an option or for any questions that you all have, whether it be online or here with us today. Let us know any questions you have. Yes?
Thank you, James, and I want to thank you both.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, James, and thank you, Jeremy and Medulla, for the information this morning. I just want to follow up on a comment you just made about the concurrent review. I know that when I first started my practice here, that was very much the routine of smaller projects. You would do a preliminary plan and a detailed site plan at the same time. But because of some of the mandatory review timelines, the development community was encouraged to start staggering applications. Is it now coming to be where it's a situation where when it comes to the actual submittal and review, staff is taking the position that a concurrent review of them is, I understand there will be a lot to work out because if you maybe don't get your preliminary plan approved or there's some issues there, it can impact the detailed site plan, but at least the review can happen at the same time.
Absolutely, that's very much so. That's exactly what we want to take place right now because we realize that we don't want to stagger and prohibit development. That's really important here. We do not want that to happen. I want to make that very clear. And so between the county council and the planning board, they realize that. So that's why they put that in the zoning ordinance, that is an option here. So please feel free to take advantage of that. Okay? So definitely do that. Any other questions that you have? Nothing else? No one online? Yes, sir. We have one.
Thank you. Will we be able to get a copy of the slides?
Absolutely. We've got your email address, so we're going to email that out to each one of you, even the folks online. They have a copy of this PowerPoint presentation as well. And if you have any questions after that, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll answer those questions too. So it looks like we've got one person online. Another question online?
Can we discuss steps being taken to shorten up the acceptance process?
To shorten up the acceptance process, in the new zoning ordinance, there are mandatory dates for what we call pre-acceptance reviews. So there's a 15 days for staff to review an application and provide comments back to applicants. So staff will review it after the submittal package has come in. There's 15 days. Beforehand, that was more so like an internal policy that we had. Now it's already in the zoning ordinance and the subdivision regulations that we have to respond and provide that response or comment response within those 15 days. Now, here's another thing that's in there that many people didn't realize. I call it the 3 strikes you're out rule. So after the third round of reviews, if that application has not been accepted, the applicants can make a petition to the planning director or for acceptance at that point in time. There's a petition, they can request that to them. That is an option within the zoning ordinance and the subdivision regulations. We haven't seen that happen too often recently because we do see where staff has been providing back comments to the applicants and they get accepted typically after the second time frame, but that is an option out there for you all within the development community itself. So it kind of helps out there. Ms. Camp, yes?
Oh. Thank you. First, I wanted to say thank you for these, for the brown bags. I think they're very important, and want to thank you and the director for making sure we have this opportunity. I guess I wanted to say a little bit more about that. I do think, and let me also say to Jeremy and thank you. I do think sometimes that there has been an issue, which I think you all have been addressing, not just the time frame, but the content. So sometimes when you have the pre-acceptance and you're asked questions, sometimes I think we take issue with the questions that are being asked pre, as opposed to post-acceptance. And I do see an improvement on that, but still something. I know you're working really hard to make sure, and then also, and I'm really happy about the other, because sometimes to go back more than 3 times when maybe you could have asked those questions the first time has been an issue. So I just want to say thank you for addressing both of those, because I think that's one of the things that adds time.
Absolutely, absolutely. We've heard that comment for quite some time. So that was the reason for that. We want to make sure we address that as much as possible. We don't want a situation, to your point, where we're at the fourth round of reviews, we're bringing up brand new comments, right? I hear that all the time. I'll tell you right now, I've heard it many times. And so, but we don't want that to happen. But what I do want to see is whenever comments are provided to you all or questions are coming to you all, there's an explanation for that. So if you need to understand why that question's being asked, feel free to ask that question, all right? Because we want to make sure that there should be some type of real true reason why that's needed before we get into acceptance, or even after acceptance, right? So when we get to SDRC, just like they were talking about earlier, when we get to SDRC, why are you all asking this question? Well, the reason why is because this may come up later on down the road, or we want to provide for a more high quality development. If that's the case, have you thought about X, Y, and Z? Which would help you really before we get to the planning board or before you get to district council, because after our experience, we know this question could come up. I mean, one of the questions I know that, we've talked about in the past was regarding dog parks. And we know that one of our commissioners may ask that question. So if that's an opportunity for you all to provide that in the development, we want to go see if that's possibly something that you want to provide, right? So that's just one way of looking at some of these questions that we do provide. It's an opportunity for us to kind of reach out to you to give you a good comments from our standpoint, from a planning standpoint, what's going to give a good high quality development, not just from what we've experienced, what we've seen, but for in general for what the zoning ordinance is saying, what planning conferences, we get information all the time from that. So what have we seen? We can provide you our expertise at the same time under this review.
And I just want one more thing on that. It has been exceedingly helpful because as someone who writes a statement of justifications, a lot of times that pre-app conference really does make writing that statement of justification a lot smoother.
And so one thing I do want to add, I know we're getting close to the top of the hour. The great thing about this Brown Bag series is also getting feedback. This is what we need to hear. What's working, what's not. Is there a lot of red tape? Is it very bureaucratic? Does our code make sense? We're even internally doing a lot of training with our staff, right? So there's a lot to digest. So I really want you guys to understand that this is a very collaborative process. And so if we need to revisit a topic at a future session, let us know. For those that are online, we have 45 people online. For those that are online that felt like their question wasn't answered, feel free to send us an email because we're all about making sure we answer questions clearly and that we're listening. And so what I'm hearing is that there might be some future discussions that we need to have about multiple reviews, delayed comments. I'm meeting regularly with DPI, and so I think it's really important that, got to stand in front of the camera. It's really important that not only our commission is also being mindful of all the back and forth, but our partner agencies as well. So we really want to make sure you guys are hearing that we're hearing you as part of this process. And so I think we have maybe a couple minutes left, but I'll turn it back over to James.
Sure. Another question?
Acceptance used to be a check on the completeness of the application. Now each step is a formal review. I presume that practice will continue moving forward?
I guess I need a little clarification on that because we have a checklist. There's a checklist for every application type that we have. And so as a part of that process, we do have to ensure that those required documents and that those required pieces of information are provided as a part of that process in order to get accepted at that point. So maybe if there's a way to get a little bit more clarification on that, we have to look into that.
Margaret,
So-
I could
I
probably,
think it's
yeah.
the same thing, the
Is
substance
it?
of, it used to be,
Okay.
did you provide it?
Yep.
Not a
Hold on.
analysis.
Okay, I got you.
So
Okay.
it's the same question.
So yeah, gotcha. So yeah, if that's the case, then it's one of the things that we may want clarification on what you provided. But we'll take a look at that as a part of this whole round and see how we can better improve that part of the process too. All right. Tell me something. Has this been helpful today? I'm hoping so. That's the intent. We want to make sure this is very fruitful and for you all, not only for you all, but for us too. Because we want, just like the director was saying, we want to get feedback from you all so we can improve the process. It's not just about us, and it's about you all. So how you all are going through the process, so we can kind of streamline things as much as possible. Because we're always looking at ways to do that. Okay. All right. Anything else? That's excellent. Well, thank you all for coming out today and spending your lunch hour with us. I appreciate it. Again, I've got my card. There are other folks in here in the room that have cards as well. Please reach out to us. As a part of, just like we were talking about earlier, we'll give you all a copy of the presentation. In addition to that, a copy of, or provide you all the phone number and email address to our Planning Information Services team, just in the event you do have further questions, okay? All right, thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.